Psychologist Carl Jung once said, "We are not hurt by what we don't know, but by what we refuse to see." For an avoidant, what they refuse to see is their own heart. If you've ever loved an avoidant, you know the feeling. One day they're warm, giving you a look you thought only existed in romance movies. The next day, they vanish as if they never existed. No texts, no explanation, just you, wondering, what did I do wrong? Here's the truth, no one told you sometimes, their silence isn't indifference. It's them fighting a storm inside, the fear of being seen too deeply, the fear of getting hurt, the fear of losing themselves in love. They build walls, high, thick, impenetrable, not to hurt you, but to survive. And in their lifetime, they open only a small crack for one person. The question is, are you that person? Because if an avoidant leans towards you, revealing a dark corner they've never shown anyone, it's not just a moment, it's a milestone. It's their quiet way of saying, you're more special than you think. But here's what you must understand, that moment is both precious and fragile, and how you respond will decide whether that door opens wider or closes for good. Avoidants rarely open up, and it's not because they want to be mysterious or play games with you. The root cause often begins very early, sometimes long before they even had the words to name their feelings. Some grew up in an environment where every time they cried, they were told to stop. Every time they showed weakness, they were told, be strong, don't bother others. And sometimes, the only love they knew was conditional love, affection when they behaved, coldness when they made a mistake. Slowly, their young minds learned a clear lesson. Expressing emotions equals unsafe. They began to build walls. Not wooden fences you can kick down, but towering fortresses with multiple layers of locks and bolts. These walls were built to protect their hearts from blows they were certain would come if they got too close to anyone. This isn't a manipulation tactic, it's survival. When someone learns that showing emotions leads to pain, hiding them becomes the only way they know how to feel safe. That's why, if one day you see that door crack open even just a sliver, it's a clear sign something inside them is shifting. An avoidant will never do that unless they feel something incredibly rare, safer than usual. And that sense of safety doesn't appear out of nowhere. It's created, slowly, piece by piece, through your patience, not pushing them to spill everything right away, giving them time to process. Your consistency, not being warm today and cold tomorrow, but keeping a steady rhythm they can rely on. Your understanding without pressure, listening without rushing to fix, without turning every conversation into an emotional interrogation. These factors lead them to think, maybe, just maybe, this is the person I can unlock the vault for. When it happens, it's rarely a grand, dramatic event. More often, it's so subtle you might miss its significance in the moment. A story they've never told, a question they've never dared to ask, a moment where they don't leave when the conversation turns deeper. These are all small steps, but for them, each one is a journey against the lifetime reflex to defend. This is why many people mistake their silence for indifference. In truth, they're silent not because they don't care, but because they care too much and it scares them. They keep their distance because their real feelings are so strong that showing them feels unbearably vulnerable. The challenge is this: you can never force them to take down their walls. You can only create an environment where they choose to open the door themselves. And when they do, understand this: for an avoidant, that's not an ordinary moment. It's a turning point. Picture again the fortress wall I described earlier, tall, thick, fortified, built from painful memories and harsh lessons from childhood. Now imagine a single brick being removed, just one. But for them, that almost never happens. And if you're the one standing on the other side of that wall when it does, you need to understand, you're witnessing something rare. These are not ordinary gestures. These are signs that only a very small number of people will ever receive from them. And each one is a breakthrough in the inner world of an avoidant, a world where feelings and fear are always at war. 1. They share something personal. Someone with an avoidant attachment style will never casually open their mouth and start talking about their childhood or the wounds buried deep inside them. They don't just sit down and spontaneously speak of days filled with emotional deprivation, moments of abandonment, or a sharp remark that carved itself into their memory. These stories are not fun anecdotes. They are the core contents of an emotional vault they've locked shut long ago, secured with layer upon layer of protection. When you hear them share a painful childhood memory or recall an experience they've never told anyone, not even the people closest to them, you must understand. This is not just information. This is a spending from their lifelong emotional currency, something they've held onto tightly for survival. And to them, this is not a small expense. It's like taking a portion of their survival capital, placing it in your hands, and waiting to see if you'll use it to build or to destroy. For an avoidant, every time they speak of a fear like the fear of losing you, or they express an honest reaction to something that hurt them, they are gambling with their own sense of safety. Their brain, programmed early in life to detect the risk of emotional harm, constantly warns them, the more you reveal, the greater the chance you'll get hurt. That's why when they choose to share, it's not because they've become too comfortable or let their guard down completely. On the contrary, the fact that they're still guarded is precisely what makes that choice so valuable. What does this mean? It means they've assessed, observed, and felt enough consistency and safety in you to trust that you won't weaponize what they've shared. They believe that when they reveal a fragile piece of themselves, you won't throw it into the harsh light of judgment or turn it into ammunition during an argument. And for an avoidant, that trust is a turning point. Not because it suddenly transforms them into someone entirely open after one story, but because in that moment, they've chosen to break their own survival rule. Each time this happens, they're silently saying, I'm not sure this is safe, but I want to believe that here, with this person, I can try. 2. They come back after pulling away. If their act of sharing something private is like handing you the key to a door that has been locked for years, then returning after they've withdrawn is the moment they place one foot across that threshold, fully aware that on the other side lies territory that feels dangerous to them. For an avoidant, withdrawal is a primal instinct. It's no different from the reflex of pulling your hand away when you touch something hot, immediate, automatic, and thoughtless. When emotions grow too intense, or when closeness reaches the limit their nervous system registers as unsafe, they vanish. It might mean days buried in work, weeks lost in solitary hobbies, or a silence so complete it feels like the cord between you has been severed. This isn't about punishing you, it's their way of preserving their emotional survival. But coming back after retreating, that's something else entirely. That's not reflex. That's a deliberate choice. The moment they stand at a crossroads, one path leading back to the wall that has kept them safe their whole life, the other toward the open door where you stand. And this time, they choose you. Don't be fooled by how simple the moment appears. It might be nothing more than a short message. Hey, how have you been? It might be them showing up at the coffee shop they know you frequent. But behind each act is an invisible battle. Will I be rejected? Are they still angry? Am I walking straight into harm's way? What makes this moment precious is not the words they speak, but the fact that they returned while still afraid. They didn't come back because their doubts had disappeared. They came back because the fear of losing you had grown larger than the fear of being close. For an avoidant, this is a rebellion against their own survival instinct. And when you are the reason for that rebellion, you're not just someone in their life, you are the one place they are willing to lay their weapons down. 3. They initiate intimacy. If their return after withdrawing is a step beyond the safety fence, then initiating intimacy themselves is the moment they take yet another step, moving toward you without you having to pull them in. Think back to the early days, or the long stretch before this shift. You were usually the one to reach for them first, the one who started the hug, held their hand, or steered the conversation from safe topics into something truly personal. That wasn't because they didn't want it, but because their defense system has always whispered a familiar warning. Don't get too close, it will hurt. When an avoidant breaks that script, it doesn't happen by accident. They have to push past the internal alarm, the one wired into them years ago, when they learned that closeness meant pain. Each time they reach for your hand first, wrap their arms around you unexpectedly from behind, or simply sit closer in comfortable silence, they are rebelling against their own survival instinct in favor of connection. These gestures may look small. A light touch as you're speaking, a question about something important to you that they'd usually avoid, a subtle lean toward you when you laugh. To most people, these might seem ordinary, but for them, this is a silent revolution, an experiment to see if they can stay in closeness without feeling the need to run. And here's the remarkable part. They're not doing it to test you. They're doing it because, deep down, they're testing themselves. They want to know if, this time, with you, things can be different. If closeness can feel safer, softer, and not end in the wounds they remember from the past. If you're observant, you'll notice these moments often come unexpectedly, sometimes accompanied by a fleeting look of surprise, as if they're startled by their own actions. They're stepping into territory they've only ever observed from a distance. And your presence there, receiving without pressuring, is the very reason they dare to take that step. 4. They truly apologize. On the surface, the words, "I'm sorry," may seem like just a few simple syllables. But for an avoidant, it's like stepping into an emotional minefield. An apology isn't just about admitting fault, it means lowering the protective shield, allowing someone else to see them at their most vulnerable. From a young age, many avoidants learned that making mistakes led to judgment, punishment, or the withdrawal of love. In that environment, apologizing wasn't a path to repair, it was a path to shame and devaluation. Over time, they learned to stay away from it entirely. They mastered silence, changing the subject, or counterattacking when criticized, all in the name of protecting the fragile sense of self-worth inside. So if one day they look you in the eyes and say, "I'm sorry," without following it with a "but," to shield themselves, without blaming circumstances or other people, without turning it into a debate to win the upper hand, understand that you are witnessing something rare. It's a sign of an internal shift. They believe you won't weaponize this moment of weakness against them. Behind that apology lies a battle, a clash between the instinct to run and the desire to connect, between the voice in their head saying, "If I admit I'm wrong, I'll lose all control," and the feeling in their heart saying, "If I don't speak, I might lose this person." When feelings win over fear, those simple words finally come out. To you, it might just be a sentence, but to them, it's a declaration. "You matter enough for me to lower my walls to keep you." And here's the key. A genuine apology from an avoidant isn't the end of a conflict. It's the beginning of a new chapter, one where they start to trust more, stay longer, and dare to open their heart a little more each day. 5. They start being consistent. For most people, consistency in love feels obvious, a normal expression of care. But for an avoidant, this is nothing short of a complete reprogramming of their emotional system. In the past, they lived by a deeply ingrained instinct. When they felt safe, they moved closer. When they felt pressure or threat, they immediately pulled away. Their relationships often followed an unpredictable push-pull cycle. That's why if, one day, you notice they begin texting first, remembering important dates, keeping their promises, or showing up exactly when they said they would, you need to understand that this is not natural for them. These are consciously chosen actions, the result of deliberate emotional training. Every on-time message, every effort to be present when they promised, is a small but weighty step against the reflexive self-protection they've built over a lifetime. This is emotional exercise, the daily work of managing their fear of losing freedom, their fear of being drawn too deeply into intimacy, and learning to believe that staying close to you does not mean losing themselves. This consistency is not the product of pressure, ultimatums, or fear of abandonment. If they were doing it out of obligation, it would never last. It would only make them shut down faster. The key here is, they do it because they want to. They choose to stay. Each repeated act of reliability is like an unspoken whisper. I want you to feel secure with me. And for an avoidant, that is a deeper commitment than any "I love you" or "you matter to me" could ever be. Because it's not just words, it's action, repeated often enough to break an entire pattern of living they once believed was unchangeable. If you receive consistency from someone who once feared commitment, understand that on some level, you have become the exception in their world. And that is undeniable proof that they're not just staying, they're learning how to stay. These signs, while they might look ordinary to someone securely attached, are milestones for an avoidant. Each action requires them to push past fear, to rewrite a lifelong script. And when you're the one witnessing or receiving them, you need to understand this is how they say, "You're special," without using words. From here, we'll go deeper into how to spot these signals as soon as they appear, and more importantly, how to respond in a way that helps the relationship grow without making them feel threatened. Because with an avoidant, how you handle that moment will decide whether the door opens wider or shuts for good. I've told you before, these gestures are not ordinary. They're not casual friendliness or polite social moves. They're the result of decades of defense mechanisms being tested, and for the first time, instead of winning, their fear has lost to their feelings. So when you see these signs, understand this: it's a rare step forward, and with it comes an emotional responsibility. If you want that newly opened door to keep widening, you need to know how to keep that moment from being crushed by pressure or misunderstanding. First, don't interrogate them. I know the feeling. You're surprised, curious, and you want to know, why now? Why me? Why say this today? But for an avoidant, opening up is an act of bravery, almost a reflex against their survival instincts. If you turn it into a Q&A session, they'll immediately retreat and tell themselves, I knew it, I shouldn't have opened up. Second, don't rush to demand more. Remember, their openness is like a baby bird leaving the nest for the first time. It needs time to get used to the light, the wind, and the sounds of the outside world. If you try to make it fly farther than it can handle, it will panic and return to the nest, or worse, fall. Let this process unfold at their pace, not yours. Next, acknowledge and appreciate it. Don't take their sharing for granted. For them, it's emotional currency they spend only when they believe the investment is worth it. A simple sentence like, "Thank you for sharing that with me," or "That must not have been easy to say," carries more weight than you think. It tells them you not only hear them, but you also understand the value of what they've just done. And most importantly, protect the safe space. The information they share with you is not ammunition to be used in an argument. For an avoidant, a single breach of trust can shut that door forever. You might not think you're betraying them, but if they feel you've used their vulnerability against them, they won't forget it. Next time, they'll choose silence. These principles aren't tricks to manipulate them. They're the foundation for building a relationship where the avoidant can truly believe, I can be myself here. So, when you find yourself in this rare position, resist the instinct to seize the opportunity, to get more information, or pull them closer. Instead, focus on making the space between you a place they want to return to. A place without pressure to be perfect, without the demand to always open up, but full of consistency, respect, and emotional safety. And here's the key point that leads us to the next section. When you maintain that safe environment, you'll start to notice upgraded signals. Not just that they open up once, but that they start coming back even after they've pulled away. That's the moment when it shifts from a single act of courage to a new habit being formed. And when an avoidant begins to actively return after the quiet, you're no longer just someone special. You've become the place they choose to come home to. When we talk about avoidance, we often focus only on what we can see on the surface, the silence, the withdrawal, the emotional walls. But if we turn the page and look deeper, as Bessel van der Kolk describes in The Body Keeps the Score, we realize these responses are not just conscious choices. They are the product of an entire nervous system programmed to protect them from emotional pain. When a child grows up in an environment where emotions are dismissed, punished, or simply unmet, their body and brain remember this as a potential threat. The amygdala becomes hyper-vigilant, constantly scanning for danger signals, which, in their case, is intimacy or closeness. Van der Kolk explains that trauma doesn't just live in memory, it imprints itself onto the body's responses. For someone with an avoidant attachment style, having another person move closer emotionally can trigger a near-instant fight or flight reaction. Their body tenses, their heart rate shifts, their breathing becomes shallow, and before they even have time to think it through, they've already disappeared. This isn't necessarily a cold, calculated decision. It's a survival reflex honed since childhood. This is why, as we've explored in the earlier signs, every moment they open up, come back, or initiate intimacy is not just a sweet romantic gesture. It's a victory of the nervous system over an old, embedded memory. Each of those gestures is proof that in that moment, they felt safe enough to push back against a lifelong defensive reflex. Healing, in this case, isn't as simple as changing their mindset. It requires helping the body relearn what safety feels like in the presence of closeness. Van der Kolk emphasizes the role of positive bodily experiences, yoga, mindfulness, meditation, or activities that regulate breathing and release muscle tension. For avoidance, these activities don't just calm the nervous system, They gradually expand their window of tolerance, so they can remain in moments of intimacy without triggering the urge to flee. The crucial point is this: as their partner or loved one, you cannot force this process. As van der Kolk writes, safety cannot be commanded, it must be felt. Every moment they are listened to without judgment, every time they withdraw but find you still there when they return, is a message to their nervous system. There's no danger here. Over time, this message can imprint more deeply than the old memory, and only then can signs like consistency, genuine apologies, or initiating closeness become sustainable parts of the relationship. And this is the part most people overlook. Healing for an avoidant doesn't just happen through words or surface-level actions. It begins when their body slowly relearns what safety feels like. For years, their nervous system has been conditioned to react as if emotional closeness were a threat. You can try to reassure them with logic as many times as you want, but if their body hasn't experienced that safety yet, their defensive instincts will still win. That's why the mind-body healing approach from the body keeps the score is so important. It doesn't force or demand them to change right now. Instead, it gradually expands their emotional tolerance zone so they can stay in moments of intimacy longer without being swept into the storm of their flight reflex. And once the body gets used to the idea of being close and still being safe, the mind will start to believe it too. This is when our solutions become the most powerful, from how you create a safe space, to maintaining a balanced connection, withdrawal rhythm, to responding with sensitivity when they open up. So if you want to maintain and nurture a relationship with an avoidant, you can't just think in terms of what to do to get them back. You need to think about how to help both their body and mind relearn trust together. And that's where we'll begin, as we move into the specific strategies next. Remember, an avoidant doesn't change just because they should. They change when the fear starts to fade and the feeling of safety begins to win. Every touch, every shared story, every time they come back, it's not just a beautiful moment. It's the result of decades of walls being taken down, brick by brick. You are witnessing a quiet kind of courage, the kind that isn't loud or flashy, but strong enough to rewrite the way they connect to the world. And here's the most important part: never underestimate your role. You're not fixing them. You're creating the environment where they can heal themselves, open the door themselves, and choose to stay. If you're on this journey, ask yourself, can I hold my calm, patience, and boundaries all the way through? Because a truly healthy relationship isn't a place where you constantly have to prove your worth. It's where both people feel safe to be their full selves. With an avoidant, letting you in is rare, but choosing to stay, that's sacred.